Awesome. So hello again, Petko. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you please, let's just start with you describing yourself. What do you do for a living? Where are you from? What do you do? Just tell us more.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Petko Vasilev, and I have been working in the data analytics field for over 6 years now. I currently hold a senior business intelligence analyst for a marketing agency called Synchro. What we do is we assist auto dealers with creating and managing their websites, as well as running various marketing campaigns for OEMs, dealer groups, and individual dealers, specifically like car dealers. Prior to Synchro, I worked in Sydney, Australia for the largest data analytics consulting company in Australia, which is called Quantium. And I supported several different accounts, some of which include clients such as Coca-Cola, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Big W, as well as Australia's largest supermarket chain, which is called Woolworths. So that's just a little bit of my background.
Thank you for sharing. And how did you start? That's a little bit about your background, but how did you start? Where did you go to school? Why did you decide to go for data analytics?
Yeah, so that's a bit of a long story because it wasn't my original choice. I have a undergraduate degree in finance, actually. So I worked in the finance industry for some time, and I was at a time in my career when I wasn't seeing much progression opportunities, and I was not really seeing many advancements in the organization I was working for. And that's when I decided it was time to think about alternatives to what I could possibly be doing in the future. So at that time, I decided to get back to school and get my MBA. And while I was getting my MBA, I started researching the data analytics fields. It was something that interested me. And then I started having conversations with a few folks who were in the industry. And I figured it was a career that was worth pursuing, and I decided to pursue it.
Awesome. But if not data analytics, is there something, just maybe a weird question, but if there is any other career that you would do except for data analytics, or maybe if somebody who wants to go into data analytics, but not specifically there, what would they choose?
Well, you really have to look at what you have to think about career that makes you excited and it's something that you want to do long term, right? So I can't say a specific career path for every individual. Will have a different career path and different interests. So data analytics is what interests me, partially because I constantly learn new things and I develop as both in my personal and professional life. Using the tools I use day-to-day basis. So if somebody is interested in numbers, you obviously can go from anywhere from statistical type of career path, such as data science, business intelligence, which is more on the visualization aspects of data analytics, or data analytics itself. So it just depends on what the individual interests are.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned about the learning new skills, learning something new every day that's relevant to your career path. How do you find this information? Where do you learn that?
So it's there's multiple sources. So again, it falls back to the individual level of interest on learning new things. So if you were to work in an organization, you have to look at what tools you have available within this organization and how you leverage those tools. So whether that's going to be different types of software that they utilize, it's something that you haven't used in the past, understanding what is present within the organization and how you can utilize it to just better yourself, or external tools. So there's tons and tons of online content around various coding languages that you may want to be interested in. So at the end of the day, it's more about where you see yourself, where you want to, what area you want to get better at, and then pursue the tools to use those tools to get better at it.
Okay, thank you. But let's take a little step back from like developing in this sphere, and we have a question. We're here. I'm pretty sure most of us are kind of rookies in the field. We're businessmen here, and some languages. Like we didn't study data analytics too much, or for example, as of the moment where we are right now. Can you tell us more about data analytics? What about the data analysis and how it's important for the present and how it is important for the future? And maybe just describe your day-to-day. What do you do in your job?
Yeah, sure. So as far as how is it useful for businesses in general, if you look at any medium to large size organization, they will have some sort of access to some level of data, and then most likely they would have at least thought of how they can monetize that data or how they can use that data to drive insights to understand their customers better. So that's how data analysis and just analytics in general is very useful for today's companies. As far as what I do day to day, it's having access to databases where we have data on different various data points and how we can pull those data points and put together insights that business can take, so the management part can get these insights and figure out how they can better the products we offer. So look at product performance. What we do is we do campaigns, right? So marketing campaigns. So how effective was the campaign? Why was it effective? Why wasn't it effective? That's all data driven.
Okay, thank you. And what are some pros and maybe cons of the questions? We all heard that the data analytics is on the uprise and the data companies are at all-time highs, or at least were. And what are some pros and cons that you see in this sphere, this industry in the near future?
Well, pros as far as a career choice will definitely give you flexibility. So using myself as an example, I'm working out of Sydney, Australia at the moment. And that's again because of the flexibility and of the nature of the role. I'm still working for my Seattle-based company, but I'm in Sydney because everything can be done remote. But not only the flexibility is just the seeing how you can impact decisions from the driving decisions from upper management on specific strategic decisions that are related to your overall company's performance. So that's something that I can probably say is one of the most satisfactory aspects of the job, is that you can see your direct contribution to the overall goals of the organization and performance of the organization as well, by driving those insights. On the con side, obviously can't think of many because I like what I do. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I didn't like it. The only thing I can really think of is that at times, depending on the importance of the project, there may be some off-hour work hours. So outside of your 9 to 5 typical work day, you may have to put a few extra hours later in the day, weekends sometimes. It varies on the company you work for and the projects you're involved with. And that again ties to your direct contribution to the overall performance of the organization. So if you have that direct contribution, there are quite important projects that need to be delivered in certain timelines, and those timelines sometimes are tight, and you just have to work with them.
Okay, thank you. And can you tell us what, in your opinion, defines a good data analyst?
So a good data analyst, the way I can sum it up is it's not only the ability to know how to code and extract data data sources. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there have been a lag.
Yeah,
But now
my headphones just disconnected. So can you hear me now?
yeah.
Yeah, so what I was saying as far as the data analyst role goes, what makes a good data analyst is not only the ability of writing code and extracting data out of the various data warehouses, but also understanding what the business requirements are. So typically you'll be working with some sort of a management person or a consultant, and they may not necessarily have a full visibility of what the capabilities are on the data analysis side. And that's where the analyst comes in to communicate the capabilities where additional value can be added, as well as asking critical questions related to the requirements that are communicated, because not at all times the requirements are set in stone or they're clearly defined. So that's where asking critical questions, questioning approach that is being asked to be taken is key for becoming a successful data analyst.
And what do you think is the most frequent request that maybe you have or some other data analysts have on a daily basis? What is it? A research? Is it a study? What is the most frequent request that you get from businesses?
The most frequent request, at least based off of my experience, is pulling some sort of a descriptive analysis. So descriptive analysis is essentially something that happened in the past, and we want to report some sort of a trend line. So you have sales over time, right? So you have what were the last 12 months of sales of this product, and then you want to present that to somebody who's asking for it. So that's typically the type of request would come in, where it becomes more not more challenging, but more interesting are the requests around measuring performance, where you have to start benchmarking this product sales versus something else, right? So setting up the proper benchmarks so you can actually measure uplift, setting up A/B tests, all of those things to measure performance is the more engaging and fun part of the job. But typically speaking, a typical request would be a request around descriptive analytics.
Okay, thank you. And the other question is, for probably a lot of us are interested in business and we understand the importance of data and how it's important to collect, manage it. What would you recommend for business owners, maybe for small business owners, in terms of outsourcing the data analyst or maybe learning something yourself? What would you recommend for this business owner?
For small business owner, they really have to just start asking themselves questions. What type of data do I have or do I have access to? And how can this data benefit me? So do I believe there's enough data where it can actually make a difference on my performance? So if you look at a small business operation and they don't really have a lot of online presence, so it's only a storefront type of a business, they may not necessarily have a whole lot of data points on their customers. So they won't necessarily understand who their customers are, right? So it all comes down to, for a small business, do you have enough data points for you to start considering using the data? and what data analytics capabilities you may want to explore. You also may want to think about what partnerships you can have with other businesses in your area, in your field in general, right? And how partnerships may benefit. So you may not necessarily be able to use the data you have, but somebody else may have value from that data. So then how can you monetize the data, and how maybe you'll be able to sell it and make some profit off of just having somebody else use the data you have, but you may not necessarily have use of for your business, but then somebody else may have use of that data. So just trying to understand what you actually have access to, and figuring out what are the business cases for using that data.
All right, thank you for this advice. And what would you suggest? What are, like, let's say, for example, top 3 skills that every entry-level data analyst should have when they go into the field? Like the skills that they cannot go in the field without.
Well, you definitely need to have SQL skills. So SQL is just a query language which is used by most companies to pull data from various data warehouses and databases. And then once the data is pulled, you aggregate it and you produce the insights that you believe are valuable to your organization. So SQL is definitely a must. Then communication skills are also very important, because you want to be able to clearly not only understand the requirements, but communicate what constraints may be around these particular requirements that are communicated to you. Because as far as data analysts go, you're constantly involved in group discussions around those requirements. So you'll be engaged with different managers and just folks from you go from director management level down to a completely opposite area, which is the engineers, right? So you need to have the communication skills and understanding of the business requirements and the technical requirements, so you can cover both streams, so on the management side as well as on the engineering side. So communication is definitely key, and also maths. So you need to know your numbers. So you need to be able to understand statistical significance, how you can actually prove that this is a true uplift from a given product. And that's what I was referring to earlier around setting up benchmarks, setting up A/B tests, et cetera, et cetera. So you also need to understand your maths.
Okay, thank you. And now a little bit, it's kind of the same question, but a little bit different. So what do you think? So those were like the entry skills that every data analyst should have in the beginning of their career to land this first entry-level job. But what are some skills that you identified that helped specifically you to advance in your career and go higher and higher? And what will help you in the future?
Right. So the skills I mentioned just now are like the set of skills that essentially enabled me to get my first role as a data analyst here in Sydney. What I do today is it's like an extra layer on top of those skills, which includes understanding and using Tableau, for example. So Tableau is a software visualization tool which many organizations use. So knowing how, being able to build different types of visualizations in Tableau, presenting those visualizations, automating aspects. So also knowing and understanding the full capabilities of the tool. So Tableau has a command line part of it where you can automate scripts to produce various reports from already published reports. So that's going around onto the visualization part. And also on the more technical part, you start thinking about the more catchy language that you may have heard of. Python is one of them. R is another one. So R, a lot of statisticians use but Python is used by both engineers and data analysts and data scientists to automate existing processes, do some sort of data science, predictive modeling, and all that kind of stuff. So it's building on your tools and your capabilities, and that's what I was saying earlier. Is something I actually enjoy, is the constant development that I have with my current organization. And having access to those tools, so having access to Tableau, having access to Tableau server, being able to write Python scripts, automate tools, and all that, that's all very beneficial.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Petko, for this. We had some questions in the chat. I can see them. Everybody will have an opportunity to ask their questions. I think we'll just leave them for the end of the meeting. So we have a couple of more questions that we prepared for Petko, and then we have plenty of amount for you guys to ask your questions. So I'll read them. So if you have them right now, so feel free to post them into the chat so you won't forget, and we'll read them out loud. Or if you want to wait till the questions, you'll have an opportunity to just unmute yourself and ask any question you have. So back to the topic about the skill sets. I have one particular one for you that I want to find out more. So here, I'm more into business, and in business, everybody is saying your network, your network is your net worth. And I can see how it's going on, how it's structured, right? The more people you know, it's kind of social science businesses itself. The more people you know, the more you can advance, the more communication skills you have, which are important to communicating, like the assignments that your team members have to do in your business structure, marketing, and so on. How does networking work in data? Is it as well like the same significant skill as in business, or what do you think about it?
Well, it is, because that's kind of how you find out about different capabilities. So going to Tableau conferences to understand what the latest Tableau capabilities are, going to after hours data science meetups to understand who's working on what. And you can also just do networking with prior colleagues, existing colleagues, and what their networks are, and just meeting other folks that they know through the people you already work with, or even like past colleagues, because the longer you work, the more people you have contact with, and those folks will eventually leave and go on to like working for different organizations. So staying in touch with folks who you have worked with in the past, I believe, is very important, in order to because it's something that's it's an easy contact point that you can get a better understanding of who's working on what are they doing, and is that something that you may be interested as far as career development goes. So I would definitely say it's still very important. I think that networking is important for any type of role you're in. It doesn't matter if it's business, if you're a lawyer, it doesn't really matter. It's important for everybody.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that for me. So we have a couple of more questions, guys, for Petko, and then we'll open the space for open questions from everybody. And the next question is, what is something that you know right now, but you wish you have learned much sooner? Like maybe it's something that helped you escalate in your position, but you wish like it's something that you could have learned sooner and you just missed it out.
I can't really say that I've missed it, but it's more about taking longer to understand and ramp up in order for me to do my job in a more efficient manner. So as a data analyst, you're always going to have to pull data, review the data, and then present the insights to your stakeholders. So the pulling data requires understanding of your data warehouse, and every organization has a different data warehouse. So if I were to go back in time, I'll probably allocate more time of just to understand the data warehouse I'm working with and all the different aggregates associated with the data warehouse, and see if there's any sort of a data library that I can reference for better understanding the data points that I could use. Because if you just start, it's essentially you use what you know, right? And like if you don't know what is out there, you're only able to produce so much. So if you can expand your knowledge around what's available to you at the beginning of your career at a given organization, then that expands your initial capabilities and impact as well.
Okay, thank you. The next question, maybe you have a story about how you got your first position, what helped you to get it, and what would you recommend for students who want to get this job? Like, how should they prepare? Should they have something done already before applying to the job? Should it just be some networking? What can you say about that?
Right. So it's actually both. So I can speak about how I got the first role with Quantum in Australia. So at the time I was doing my MBA, and as part of my MBA, I was able to, we started an analytics club within the school where we did a couple of projects for the school itself. So you have to start thinking about how I can start applying the skills I'm learning, and so that they transfer into projects that I can use as a reference point when I start the conversations for some roles in the future. So I did a couple of projects for the school, Seattle University at the time, and as well as worked with a couple of local companies as consulting projects. So 3-month consulting projects where you go in, understand what their problems are, what their concerns are, and trying to use data analytics, your business know-how. So one of them was trying to figure out all the use cases for their data, right? So working out on monetizing the data. So how can this data that you have access to be monetized and either used internally for improving the products you already offer, create new products, or try to sell it to somebody else, right? So it goes along those lines.
Okay, thank you. And like follow-up question, how do you monetize data, and what data is monetizable? How do you sell it? How does this process go on? How does it work?
Oh, it's it really depends on company by company. In today's world, obviously, you know, Google, Facebook, everybody's trying to connect to everybody else. They can have more data because the more data they have, the better understanding of the customer and the product performance is, right? So that's kind of how it goes around. What data points you have available, how can those data points be beneficial to somebody else, and then you build business models around that, and then you present the business models to the partner organizations and try to see if that's something they're interested in. So that's more about the monetizing of the data. And on the other hand, it goes to product, right? So one of the companies I did a consulting project for was in telematics. So they would collect a whole lot of information on vehicle performance, diagnostics, driving behavior. So that those data points can be used for the OEM, so the manufacturer of the vehicle, to figure out, okay, what parts of the infotainment system are actually used the most and what parts are not used as much. So that way you can try to reduce costs where that is possible as far as the design and development of the vehicle and the infotainment system. And then you go from driving behavior and trying to promote safe driving, fuel efficient driving, all that kind of things, right? So you have different types of products you can spin out from the data points as well.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And just to sum up before we go to the audience questions, maybe you have some particular sort of maybe tips or tips and tricks for students right now who are studying, who wants to pursue the career. Maybe some tips for them that really helped you and that you think that maybe school doesn't provide, but are really valuable.
Tips, I'll say there's always some sort of online analytics competitions. And it all comes down to practice, right? So at school, if you take a data analytics SQL course, right? So you're gonna know the basics, but following the basics, you need practice. Oh, and my headphones got disconnected again, sorry. And where the practice comes in is you have to kind of figure that out on your own. So if you want to stay relevant and have those skills you learned at school up to date, you have to be engaged with your network or just online courses where they can have some sort of capstone projects where you can apply those newly learned skills and stay up to date. Because if you learn SQL this semester and then you graduate a year from now and you haven't touched it, guess what? You're not going to really know a whole lot about it. And not only knowing the SQL, but also understanding how data aggregation works and what tables you're using in the data warehouse and how those data points in those tables transfer into your insights. Because one thing that I'll have to say is, like, I've interviewed quite a few people for the role. I've mentored quite a few people for the role, and oftentimes for new starters, even if you know how to pull the data in, you still need to be able to validate the data and confirm that what you're intending on pulling from the data warehouse is actually true what you're pulling. And that's where data aggregation comes into play, trying to understand what level of aggregates you're using. Are those daily grain, monthly grain, and et cetera, et cetera. So understanding the data you're using and validating your data is a must in my book.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Petko, for this meeting. Thank you so much for answering all our questions. Thank you. Just thank you for being here. You're a really unusual guest for us. You're the first data type, computer type guest that we have. And I'm actually really excited that we have such a diversity in guests. And last question before we go to, I know I told it before, but I'm sorry, guys. Last question before we're going to students' question is, how can people reach out to you if they can? You've mentioned networking and you mentioned mentorship. Maybe if somebody wants to ask you some additional questions after the meeting, or maybe some mentorship from you, how can people reach out to you?
Most likely easiest way for them would be through LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Everybody should be on LinkedIn. So you can always send a private message with exactly what your goals are, what you're interested in, and yeah, and then we can continue the conversation, see if there's something I can help out with.
Awesome. So I'll put the link for Petko's LinkedIn into the chat, so everybody please connect to him. I'll be putting it in a second, and we have some questions first from Nada, and then we have some questions from Yusuf in the chat. So Nada, I can read them out loud, and maybe you want to unmute yourself and just ask some questions.
Yeah, I can read them. So thank you for coming, Petko, and thank you for answering all our questions. So my first question would be, what are some skills that you learn by doing your job? So I know, like, you learned a lot of skills even before getting into, like, the actual job of data analytics, but what are some skills that you developed throughout the job?
One of probably the key skills I would say is just managing requirements and managing expectations, because different stakeholders will have different requirements and different expectations as far as timelines go and just project requirements in general. So trying to be the gatekeeper around what those requirements are and what is actually possible is very important. because folks may not necessarily understand the work necessary to produce some sort of an analysis, right? So that falls onto the analyst. So if the analyst just says yes, yes, yes to everybody, then they're just going to dig themselves in a hole, and they're just going to be struggling to perform, right? So managing expectations is something that I think is very important that I've learned.
Thank you for answering my question. So my next question would be, how did you develop your communication skills? Because before you were talking about communication skills, and what is an advice that you would give to students to actually start developing their communication skills now?
Yeah, so communication skills starts from where you guys are at, or actually even earlier. It's just presentations. The more presentations you do, the better you get at it. So with my with my finance background, I actually was involved in presentations within the entire Northwest region. So I'll travel around and do presentations on different finance products, et cetera, et cetera. But then as far as the school goes as well, within the school, you obviously should have some sort of presentations. And what I also did as part of my undergraduate is I actually took some speech classes. So in speech, public speaking, all of those courses, they focus on presentation skills, not saying a whole lot, and just trying to speak as clearly as possible. And then also understanding your audience. So with presentation skills, with communication skills, is also, you have to be able to understand who your audience is, what type of language and terminology you should be using for that particular audience. Because something, you as a data analyst, you have meetings with directors and managers and consultants, but you also have meetings with engineers. So those two sets of meetings, the nature of those meetings is quite different. So the terminology also needs to be adjusted.
Thank you so much for answering my question.
Yeah, no worries.
So I saw that Yusuf have a question, and Yusuf, if you want to unmute yourself and ask, or do you want us to read it out loud?
Sure, I'll just read it. So thank you. Thank you for coming here first. So I had a question about data analysis. So for example, when you get your data, you structure it via SQL or anything you use. What do you use to mine this data? Like, do you use machine learning algorithms, or do you just use like data visualization and try to make theories on your own on how to mine this data? Like, how do you make this process work?
So it really depends on what the business ask is. So when you talk about mining data, that's more about the predictive analytics, is trying to predict what this data or how the customer will behave. So that's where the algorithms come in. The algorithms are usually trying to predict something, right? So that's where algorithms come into play. Typical data visualization type of analysis is more of a descriptive type of analytics. So you pull the data, you load it into Tableau, you have certain level of aggregates that you do, you create calculations and parameters in Tableau, you build your visuals, and you display your insights within Tableau is a typical route to go about extracting and presenting data. So for algorithms, that's more a typical way for you to do some sort of a predictive analysis would be to utilize different Python libraries, for example, because you can load in decision tree algorithms, random forests, et cetera, et cetera. So all of those are just libraries in Python that you can utilize if you use Python. And then obviously there's visualization libraries, et cetera, et cetera. So for you to present those results and predictions and all that. For most part, a data analyst is where it stops is more around the A/B testing and using benchmarks to determine performance of a given campaign or product. And to do that, you just try to understand what the appropriate benchmark is. So you look at comparable time periods, you look at comparable products, comparable customer groups, all those things. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.
And we have a question for Kay. And Kay, do you want to ask it yourself or do you want us to read it out loud? Do you have mic? Okay. Oh.
We were just talking about presentation skills. I think the presentation skills are very important.
I have a hard time hearing you, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Kay. It's very hard to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, now it's better.
Okay, so sorry. Yeah, you were talking about presentation skills before, and I know that presentation skills are important no matter where you go. What were the specific skills that helped you become eloquent at presentation or presenting? My bad.
Probably confidence. If you don't come across as confident in what you're actually trying to present, most likely people are not going to be engaged in listening to you very much. So definitely try to show yourself as confident in what you're presenting and believing in it is something that I found that has worked for me. Other than that, just know your stuff. So just know what you're presenting and be prepared to have those follow-up discussions. And even if somebody questions what you're presenting, they question the validity of it and all that, be able to back up what you say is what I'm saying. So like kind of be ready to be exposed or be under fire and be able to deal with that pressure. I would say is very important.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Guys, do you have any more questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself. Feel free to put them into the chat. We have about 10 more minutes left, so we have plenty of time to answer all of your questions, so feel free to put them. Keep the questions going. Okay, well, I can ask a question. It's not exactly about, it's about your first like undergraduate degree and the experience you had with finance. Why did you decide that finance is exactly not it? It's like not something that you want to do. And can you talk maybe about something that you had to do in finance as part of your working experience?
Yeah, so with finance is very broad, right? So I didn't want to get into the specifics. So I was specifically working for a private pension fund. And with that type of a role, you do all sorts of calculations around people's retirement benefits, et cetera. Then you present those, you communicate plan requirements and all of that. And where I decided it wasn't really, or I shouldn't say it wasn't it for me, I just came to a time where I wasn't seeing a whole lot of growth potential for myself in that particular company, in that particular field. And I also was thinking about from career development prospects, Seattle is not the best place for finance. Well, you can always be a financial advisor, right? But then like, what else are you gonna do in Seattle, right? There's not a whole lot you can do. It's not New York, it's not Chicago, right? So then from that aspect, I just started thinking about what would be a role where it would be more transferable across industries, where it's not really limited to a single industry. And that's what got me excited about data analytics, because with data analytics, in Quantium, I was supporting a supermarket chain and various suppliers to the supermarket. And I'm working for a marketing agency which supports car dealerships across the entire United States. So the industries vary and it's a very transferable role. So I can essentially get job for any type of an organization that's a good size organization that has the technology behind it. So that's what got me excited about what I do today.
Okay, thank you for answering. Also about, I have another question about the SQL. So I tried to take last year in summer, I tried to take some like courses through Coursera on SQL because my brother told me that it's important to know. So I was like, okay, I should look into it. Well, it didn't end well for me, just a little spoiler. The only thing I remember from it's like select from, that's all. So I also remember where. So, but that's not the point. So when I was studying SQL, they were providing some lectures and some additional resources. And one of the additional resources was talking about non-SQL database languages. And it basically divided the languages into SQL and non-SQL. So what do you think about the future of non-SQL? Is it possible that there is gonna be a new language that will be introduced which will be better than SQL, and how to adapt to this change?
My personal belief is no. You have different types of SQL. So NoSQL is just like a different flavor of SQL. So you have different flavors of SQL itself, but the core structure of the language is designed to query the data and to extract data. How you do that? So today, even if you use a Python package to build a predictive model, right? That model still needs to pull the data from somewhere. And within the whole model, you're still going to have some sort of a SQL syntax somewhere which pulls the data for you into the model, and then the model does what it does. So SQL is embedded in all data pool environments that I've worked with. Obviously, if you have a data lake type of an aspect so you're talking about big data, so you have Hadoop type of environments, yes, they do use different types of languages, but all of those try to add a layer on top of whatever the language they may be using to be SQL friendly syntax for that very reason, because different organizations, different companies in the technology sphere, they do realize that, and they recognize the fact that SQL is a very widespread skill across the industry with engineers, data analysts, database administrators, all of those. So it's something that can easily be maintained and used in the future. So I think it's going to stick around for at least quite some time.
Okay, thank you. And what about, I don't know how relevant is it to the industry that you're in, but there is a new technology, probably everybody heard about it, blockchain technology that's emerging right now. It's really booming. Do you see any opportunities how blockchain will be tied to data analysis, or is it just impossible? What do you think about it?
To be honest with you, I haven't really had a whole lot of exposure to how the two can work together. I think from my basic understanding, one of the main advantages of blockchain technology that is encrypted and all that kind of stuff. So it goes back to not only access, but monetizing the data. And so I don't think there's, at least as far as I'm aware of, I don't believe there's opportunity there, again, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, thank you. And one last question from me. So do you know any other languages, computer languages, and how relevant are they for your job?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, when I started the role I'm currently in, or it has evolved through the years, of course, but when I started, one of the requirements was to know some sort of either R or Python. So I had basic R language skills and basic to non-existing Python. So today, Python, I'm like an intermediate to a little bit better than intermediate, I would say. And it again goes back to what you need the language for and how you can apply it to your day-to-day job. So recently I haven't actually used it much because I'm just involved in a lot more project management type of responsibilities with Tableau server and managing all that. But yeah, so Python is something that I definitely have picked up, and I see the value in it.
Okay, thank you. So guys, we have 5 minutes left. So please feel free to ask your questions while we still have chance today during this meeting. And maybe if you will come up with some questions after, I already posted the Petko's LinkedIn account, so feel free to connect and ask your questions there too.
I have a question, but like it's really like a really informal question. So I wanted to ask if you like Australia, if you like to, because you said you live in Australia right now, right?
Sorry, just my headphones got disconnected again. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, no problem. So, I wanted to ask, you said you live in Australia now, right?
Yes.
So I just wanted to ask, like, if you like it and how is it there? It's like a really informal question, but I was just curious about that.
Oh, about Australia?
Yeah.
So with Australia, I'm here at least once a year because my wife is from here. So we come here once a year at least for 3 weeks, usually 2 to 3 weeks. So I used to live here. So I lived here for 2+ years. Yeah, it's nice. I can't complain. It's end of summer here right now, so it's definitely warmer than it is in Seattle. And life is normal over here. There's 0 cases of COVID-19 here for over 30 days now in Sydney, so we don't have to worry about it. So yeah, not too much to complain about.
Wow, that's really nice. Thank you.
No worries.
I'm sorry, Henry, did you have a question?
No, I actually just have a comment, and I just wanted to say that this is a really, really great conversation, and thank you to the speaker. I just think that I know it because I learned it the hard way that without knowing how to read, interpret, and make sense of data, it's really difficult to function in today's society. Just about any job will require that you do have an understanding of how data is gathered, and more importantly, how do you make sense of it, and not only make sense of it, but make sure that the data is validated and correct, as the speaker said. So I was in a seminar, and the person said, every student should be taking statistics early on, no matter what, and learning some of the software like the software that go along with data, like Tableau and SQL. So I just wanted to say that, it's important to take your data early on to understand statistics from the beginning.
Thank you, Henry, for the advice. I just recently got to know about Tableau, and it's actually so easy to use. Like, it may be confusing for the beginning, and I don't want to say that I'm super pro at it. I just like entry-level understanding of this Tableau. But it's really making so easy to visualize data, and like, I just love it. We used it for some of my business projects. It was a requirement for us to know about it. I'm just do not regret that I learned about it. So guys, we have about a minute left. So any last minute questions before we end the meeting today? Anybody, one last minute question. It can be anything, guys. I'm telling you. Ask about dogs, ask about cats, ask about anything. We have 1 minute left. Ask about the weather. It can be anything, come on. Okay, so if you don't have any questions, so I would say I think we can end our meeting here. It was just fascinating. I really enjoyed today's meeting. So thank you so much, Petko, for coming. Thank you for explaining data analytics. Thank you for sharing your story and teaching us something new today.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for joining too. just again, feel free to connect, and I would highly encourage you guys to connect to the meeting, and please not to the meeting, connect to the Petko. Ask your questions there, connect, network. As Petko mentioned, networking is still the key, no matter of your profession and industry. So feel free to connect, feel free to ask your questions, and I'll see you guys next week. We will actually have our first CEO next week, Kunal, CEO of, oh my God, I forgot the company. I'm so sorry, but we have a CEO. It's multi-million